What's up, party people? My name's Chris, and I'm a bookaholic. I may also be a little bit jacked up on coffee. It should be a good video. I want to talk today about one author, and I have most of his books. And honestly, I love this guy. He's been a huge part of my life. I've actually never met him, though, personally. I think we have some mutual friends, and this guy has been pretty influential. I love the way that he writes. Now, he can be a little long-winded, but so can I. And the only complaint that people have is that he could probably use a decent editor now and then. And but he's had one, numbers of them. And I actually am in it for the long haul with his books, and I don't mind that they're lengthy, a number of hundreds of pages. And I'll talk about each of these books here, and then ultimately you can make a decision if you want to dive into it. But for me, I'm all in. So if he puts something out, I want to get a hold of it. And even if it's not traditionally published with Ignatius Press, which has been his, kind of dominant publishing platform, I'm still going to try to seek it out and snag it. I want to, continue to support him. For the longest time, Michael O'Brien, who's the author of Father Elijah and probably a good couple dozen others, this guy was the primary fictional writer that was being published with Ignatius Press. Now, there's certainly been others, and especially over the years, but in the late 90s, when I was first introduced to Michael D. O'Brien's writing, there was really hardly any, outlet for fictional writing when it came to the Catholic milieu. Now, this is a small aside, and most of you won't care, but back in the late 80s and early 90s, Christian fiction started to take off. Bodhi Tone, I'm not even sure if that's how I would pronounce her name properly. But even Stephen Lawhead, some of these authors that are fairly well known have been writing for decades and decades and had some initial exposure, not only in just basically, traditional publishing outlets, stores like, B. Dalton's and Walden Books, but you could find them in like Christian bookstores. I used to work in a Christian bookstore when I was a younger guy, and I always was drawn to, for example, the fantasy books that were coming out by Stephen Lawhead, like the Warlords of Nin and all of that, because there was no other authors that were really available. Easter of 1999, I became Catholic, and I know, again, what does that have to do with a book channel? But it kind of does in a way, because this author is primarily known within the Catholic circles and for fiction writing. So it's a very specific and unique niche. By the time Easter of 1999 came around, I was already married with 3 kids and was doing a band around the country. And it was kind of a cool journey. And one of the stops that we made, we stopped at a Trappist monastery in Conyers, Georgia. And this was, I think it was called the Monastery of the Holy Spirit. And I was really brand new to being Catholic. And this guy at the bookstore at that monastery must have heard about us stopping there. And we'd been there a few times before. And he gave me a stack of books, tons of books, for free. I didn't ask him for it. It just happened. It was a crazy thing. And in that basket of books was this book right here, Father Elijah, An Apocalypse by Michael D. O'Brien. Now, this was before I had heard of, that Left Behind series. And I knew nothing about this author. I knew very little about Ignatius Press. I really wasn't reading a lot of fiction at that time. I was reading a lot of religious books, especially since I was trying to really kind of come to grips with what it looked like for me to do this Catholic thing. And I decided to read this book. And this book I finished in July of 1999. And I know that because on the back of my books, after I finish them, I usually will write the date. And on this one, I put down July 4th, 1999, and 1999 at 10:15 p.m. I mean, I'm pretty neurotic and specific here, but and my little note at the end was awesome book, and I have such great memories of this book, and it's really just the story of this priest who ultimately is, constantly struggling against the world and ultimately even the diabolical forces, specifically even the Antichrist, and just this whole idea of living the faith in very tumultuous and difficult times. How does that happen? And there's so many rich moments of philosophical discussion and dialogue. Well, this book started the journey for me, and I began to read all the books that were in that Children of the Last Days series. I think the next in that series was Strangers and Sojourners. This one's a little bit beat up, but by the way, on all of these books, the front cover art is by Michael O'Brien here. I finished this one on 7/31/99, so I was at home. How do I know that? Because it says that in the back of it. But so literally just, I don't know, 3 weeks later, I devoured this book. And then from that, I went into Plague Journal, I believe. And Plague Journal, 8/6/99. I was in Geneseo, New York, actually staying at a Trappist monastery as I was traveling around. And this book was phenomenal. This book was a little bit more like Father Elijah, and ultimately it was kind of like what would happen if, the government kind of implemented all of these things that were so restrictive, adverse, and antagonistic towards one's faith. And so you have, just this weird series of progressions where they have to basically live and survive. There's a sense of apocalyptic kind of panic, and yet hope in their God. So this is a novel of hope about failed loves and failed lives, and yes, even failed societies. It touches the heart of things in the lives of those whom O'Brien calls children of the last days. The central character is Nathaniel Delaney, the editor of a small-town newspaper who's about to face the greatest crisis of his life. And as the novel begins, ominous events are taking place throughout North America, but little of it surfaces before the public eye. Set in the not-too-distant future, the story describes a nation that is quietly shifting from a democratic form of government to a form of totalitarianism. And though at the first the new regime seems benign, assuming broad powers and reducing civil rights from the purpose of protecting the country from terrorism and civil unrest, it soon demonstrates its real nature. Delaney is one of the few voices left in the media who's willing to speak the whole truth about what is happening, and as a result, the full force of the government is brought against him. And, this book, that kind of idea of just surviving, trying to be a person of integrity, I ate it up. So I'm not 100% sure on the actual order of these, but I think this is the order I read them. So Father Elijah, and then Strangers and Sojourners, and Plague Journal. That might be just my reading order, but it doesn't partly matter. You can check it out. The next book I think that I had read was Eclipse of the Sun, and again, all of these are like awesome. I wish I would have. Anyway, 10/7/99. So as you can see, that's all I'm like reading through. This one's super beat up. It's well loved, and these books were not small. I mean, we're talking in the close to 900 pages here. But I was really in it for the long haul. I was super interested in just being in the book. And then, of course, Sophia House, which I read not too long ago. I finished that in 2022. This actually, though, takes us back to Father Elijah. It's just kind of like a real... This is like his early years. This is the the one that most people know of, this book. And then there's this one, which is one of the ones that I have not read yet, which is called Elijah in Jerusalem. And this one came out 2015. Anyway, on all of his books, these are icons that Michael O'Brien himself has drawn. I love his artwork, and I think that's one of the treats to his books, is getting a chance to, experience and see his icons, his iconography. Okay, so anyway, so we have, they all look great together, honestly, up on the stage. So you have those books that are the Children of the Last Days, and you have this book I read a couple of years ago, The Lighthouse, was probably one of the best books that I've ever read. I still, to this day, love this book. And actually, I'm probably going to try to reread this. But it's just this story of a gentleman who finds himself kind of working a lighthouse. Just the small little encounters that he has, and the coming to grips with who he is, and kind of that loneliness and the need for community. Ethan McQuarrie is a young lighthouse keeper on a Thailand island, the rugged outcropping of easternmost Cape Breton Island on the Atlantic Ocean. A man without any family, he sees himself as a silent vigilant, performing his duties courageously year after year with an admirable sense of responsibility. He cherishes his solitude and is grateful that his interactions with human beings are rare. Even so, he's haunted by his aloneness in the world and by a feeling that his life is meaningless. So his courage, his integrity, his love of the sea and wildlife, of practical skills, and of learning are, in the end, not enough. He's faced with the internal storms and sometimes literal storms of terrifying power. And this book, to me, is a masterpiece. It's so good. The other book that I read right after that was fantastic, and I mean, outstanding. And if you have anyone in your life who's an artist and who's maybe struggled, I mean, I just feel like Sophia House, which I previously lifted up, and this one, The Fool of New York City, those are so good. And this book was remarkable. I actually liked The Lighthouse better, but I mean, in terms of like 5-star books, both of these are unreal. They're great. And they're small. With regards to Michael O'Brien's books, they're small. A Cry of Stone. Okay. Voyage to Alpha Centauri. This is, a science fiction contribution. And then A Father's Tale. I don't have the actual dust jacket for this. I just finished this. This book was about a father who is going to help rescue his son from a cult, and the ache of a father as he makes his way through multiple countries to try and see if he can rescue his son. It's pretty profound. And then a book that's somewhat connected to that is called The Sabbatical, which is kind of a separate storyline from one of the characters that you meet in A Father's Tale. The Father's Tale. Now, I don't know that you officially really need to read this one first, but it does introduce you to the primary character in this. Dr. Owen Whitfield is an elderly Oxford professor of history who first appeared in Michael O'Brien's novel The Father's Tale. In the events of the sabbatical, which occurs sometime later, Dr. Whitfield is looking forward to a sabbatical year of peace and quiet, garnering in his backyard and tinkering with what he calls his latest unpublishable book. As the year begins, he's drawn by a series of seeming coincidences into involvement with a group of characters from across Europe, including a family that has been the target of assassination attempts by unknown powers. So during his journey to Romania, the situation in which he finds himself becomes more sinister when than it first seemed. So it's got a lot of familiar, not tropes, but themes for O'Brien, for his books. His newest book is called By the Rivers of Babylon, and I'm definitely excited about diving into this one. Michael O'Brien's going to be, he's just a great storyteller, period. And but he's a little bit more interested in, why we do what we do, why we feel what we feel, think what we think, what's the impact of philosophies and religion in our life, how do we deal with a culture that's at odds with those philosophies and religions, that kind of thing. So Ezekiel is a bricklayer. By the Rivers of Babylon presents the earlier life of the prophet Ezekiel from his childhood to his service in the temple to the Babylonian captivity, where he was enslaved among the exiles along the river Shebar. Ezekiel, a bricklayer, is simple and timid. He's not yet a priest, and his visions have not yet begun. So he stands in the midst of the Jewish exiles as they struggle to build a town of their own, to remain faithful to God's covenant without the temple, and to discern the various forces that threaten to divide them and erode their faith. All of these experiences flow like streams into Ezekiel's later mission to rally his people from inner destruction. I'm sure that he did exceptional research, and while it may not be an official biography, I think that you'll find this to be really enjoyable. I haven't read this yet, though, so I will be jumping into that soon. But another book that's kind of similar to that is Theophilus, which is basically, the Theophilus is the recipient of Luke's letter, the Gospel of Luke, and the Acts of the Apostles. So basically, Michael O'Brien takes and he is going to create a story around this, almost a little bit of a mysterious character. Who is this? But St. Luke addresses his gospel and the Acts of the Apostles to the man Theophilus. Who was Theophilus? Scripture scholars do not know, making him a fit subject for Michael O'Brien's vivid imagination. In this fictional narrative, Theophilus is the skeptical but beloved adoptive father of St. Luke. And I just love that idea, that this is the adoptive father of St. Luke, right? I mean, how cool is that? So challenged by the startling account of the Christos received in the chronicle from his beloved son Luke, and concerned for the newly zealous young man's faith, Theophilus, a Greek physician and an agnostic, embarks on a search for Luke to bring him home. He's gravely concerned about the deadly illusions to which Luke has succumbed regarding the incredible stories around Jesus of Nazareth, a man of contradictions, who has caused so much controversy throughout the Roman Empire. And so in some ways, that's kind of an interesting take, is that, this father going to try to find Luke, who he's worried about his whole fixation upon this person, Christ. I mean, it has some similarities to, that father feel in A Father's Tale. Actually, I've started this and really excited about that. So there's a couple more by O'Brien, just a few left here. This is a biography about him by Clemens Cavelin. This was recently published, and I'm really kind of interested in this just because I really find myself intrigued by his creativity. And one of Michael O'Brien's sons is a Jesuit priest, and he's had his family, of course. He has a large family, and has been fairly consistent in terms of his stances. So this is called The Mysteries of the Most Holy Rosary. So these are all the mysteries of the Rosary, but with his icons and some kind of prayer portions next to it. And again, I find myself very drawn to his icons anyway. So, and then the last couple books were put out with I don't know if this is an independent publishing company that he himself is a part of, but Wise Blood Books, which is, or maybe it's just kind of they're just printing it. I don't know. Long and the short of it is The Apocalypse, and this is Warning, Hope, and Consolation. So this would not be a fictional presentation. This, from his perspective, right, is a word that is needing to be heard. And then the family and the new totalitarianism. So if you just think a little bit about, the stories that he's told, like you have the Father Elijah and, the Children of the Last Days. This book, The Apocalypse, is not a big surprise. And if you even just think about his book, Plague Journal, and the family and the new totalitarianism, this, of course, is not even a departure as well. If anything, his ideas are probably a little bit more unpacked now. after 20 years have passed since his initial offerings, if you will. So there are other books that I have this gorgeous book of his icons as well that I don't know where that's at right now, but all that to say, if you've not tried Michael D. O'Brien, I just would love to say give it a go. And for those of you that like kind of those, I don't know, books that have a little bit more of a philosophical and even just a religious milieu, you give Father Elijah a try. I think you would probably like it. If you just want a great story that is not overtly religious, then The Lighthouse is the one for you. If you're an artist and you're thinking, that whole idea of how do you find the tone and tenor of your craft and what is life about? I mean, you have this character who is so talented, and yet he has nothing for a time, and you hear his journey, his story. So I'd recommend The Fool of New York City or even Sophia House. There's so much in there from the artist's perspective. So I'm a huge fan of his books. You're gonna be. I think what happens sometimes is that you're gonna find yourself in certain scenarios where it's provoking a conversation, and the conversation might feel like it's a little unrealistic. Most of us don't have huge, deep, rich conversations with people that we barely know, but that happens a lot in his books, because in a lot of ways that's what O'Brien is wanting to do. He's wanting to open up your ideas and your insights, and like, why do you think and feel the way that you think and feel? Where is this coming from? And so he provokes scenarios in which people have to have these rich, intense conversations. And I appreciate it. I really do, and I like it. Anyway, check out Michael D. O'Brien. He doesn't even know who I am. And if he does, he's probably rolling his eyes. So anyway, I love this stuff, and I hope you do too.